The following program is part of the continuing coverage of the 1962 political campaign by CBS News.
We as a nation are divided into three groups in our electorate. And this has been a historical fact almost since the Republican Party came into existence. 1/3 of us vote Republican, 1/3 of us vote Democrat, and 1/3 of us don't give a damn, or something.
I made some mistakes, and I admit it. They were mistakes of the head. They were not mistakes of the heart. And I am a raw-boned, big-head, big-footed Georgia cracker. I won't make the same mistake twice. Now, I might make some new ones that I never thought about, but I won't make the same ones twice.
I expect to make more speeches, travel more miles, shake more hands than any candidate in the history of California, so that we can get for the first state in the Union, which California will be at the end of this year, what I think it deserves.
Being a Kennedy has provided me with a background and an experience and education and understanding of the political process, which I feel is quite unique. But I'd say just as well that being a Kennedy has certain disadvantages here in Massachusetts.
All of those in favor of the nomination of the Honorable A. Edward Smith of Columbus, Georgia, will signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed by a like sign. I declare him our candidate. Ed.
The 50 Faces of 62. Brought to you by New Contact, the decongestant capsule that relieves hay fever misery and head cold congestion up to 12 hours. All day or all night relief with Contact.
Now, for head cold congestion and hay fever misery, get New Contact, the remarkable capsule that brings you continuous action medication. The principle tested by doctors, tested in hospitals. Only New Contact gives you this 12-hour relief power. Dries up head colds, relieves hay fever misery as no tablet does. When colds, hay fever fill up your head, take New Contact. Contact's unique medical formula stops sneezing, relieves itching, watery eyes, dries runny nose, and decongests nasal passages. Take one Contact capsule in the morning, breathe freely all day. Take one Contact capsule at bedtime, breathe freely all night. Only Contact contains over 600 tiny time pills, scientifically set like clocks. Some dissolve fast, relieve fast. The rest dissolve hour by hour as your system needs them. New Contact for 12-hour relief power, dries up head colds and relieves hay fever. Contact.
Now, the 50 Faces of 62 and Eric Sevareid.
Ed Smith, citizen. He lived without bothering the world, and the world never bothered him. Now destiny has beckoned Ed Smith. That is, a few of the boys got together and figured Ed would do. Ed Smith, tribune of the masses, a Moses to lead his people out of the wilderness, who knows? Destiny means it sometimes, and sometimes destiny is kidding. It is now spring of an even-numbered year. The climate of candidacy spreads over the land. The voice of the politician is heard again, and its decibel rating surpasses the turtle dove. Sometimes we feel we can't live with them. We know we can't live without them. It's a massive love-hate affair. But it's our own complicated, wasteful, somehow successful way of running our public business. This program is the first of several designed to show you scenes from America's semi-annual political passion play, half drama, half comedy as it is. The cast, as they say in Hollywood, is in the tens of thousands. All the spear carriers we cannot show you. We'll concentrate on some of the knights in armor, shining or rusted. We know but one rule of thumb. There are two kinds of candidates, the men and the boys. The men want public position in order to do something. The boys want it in order to be something. The trick is to tell the difference in advance. Walter Cronkite has anchored 5 election night broadcasts for CBS News, and he'll be at the helm again this year. He spells out what the stakes are and recalls off years that we have shared in our lives or our history books.
In the biggest margin in the Congress to be organized in January that any Congress has seen since 1941. It would give the Democrats a sizable working majority. So far, in the Democratic...
that was the last off-year election we shared, 1958. The first in our history was in 1789, and the total vote in that one was only about 100,000 compared to more than 50 million who will vote this year. What's at stake? Control of Congress and the state legislatures, all 435 House members, 38 of the 100 senators, and 35 of the 50 governors to be elected November 6th, and uncounted local officials, including those who literally aren't going to be elected dog catcher. Traditionally, off-year elections are wet fingers to test the political winds of presidential years. And just as traditionally, the party of the outs gains seats in the House and Senate. Only once in this century is the party of the incumbent president gained. In 1934, the Democrats picked up 9 Senate and 9 House seats, but 4 years later suffered a smashing defeat in the off year when FDR tried and failed to purge his own party of hidebound conservatives. The rebellious nature of the body politic in the off year has affected some pretty popular presidents. Eisenhower swept into office in 52, was overwhelmingly reelected in 56, but in the 54 off year, the GOP lost control of Congress, and they haven't gotten it back yet. The Republicans have had some off-year triumphs predating the Roosevelt days. Back in 1858, before we were active in TV political coverage, the infant GOP made the big gains in Congress that helped sweep them into the presidency with one A. Lincoln in 1860. The last big GOP congressional off-year sweep was in 1946, when the American electorate reacted against the supreme executive powers of the war years. This became the famous Do-Nothing Congress that Truman campaigned against in 1948. Needless to say, the returns November 6th are going to be read as an endorsement or refutation of the first 2 Kennedy years that began at a moment we shared at the Armory at Hyannis, Massachusetts, one chill November morning in 1960.
So now my wife and I prepare for a new administration and for a new baby. Thank you.
If elections in America come periodically, campaigns are almost continual. The one that reaches climax next November began the moment John F. Kennedy was elected, the moment it became apparent that the Republican Party, already a minority party in both houses of Congress, had lost the White House too. The Kennedy victory was scarcely official when Richard Nixon and Nelson Rockefeller, then as now dominant figures in their party, met to discuss the problems of the loyal opposition. The 1962 campaign by the Republicans can be said to date from this meeting.
I'd just like to say that I've been having a wonderful meeting with the Vice President, that we've been talking over the future. Both of us recognize the magnitude of the problems, both national and international, the magnitude of the problems, both national and international, which this country faces, and we want to see how the Republican Party can be a constructive, positive minority force in this whole picture.
Now, a year and a half later, both Nixon and Rockefeller are running for high office in elections that can make or break them as national leaders. Rockefeller has described himself as running scared. Yet his re-election as governor and his path to the '64 Republican presidential nomination may be smoothed by a curious default of the Democratic opposition. We have the voters, said a Democratic politician recently. They have the leaders. All our good candidates are Republicans. The Democrats have been hard-pressed to find a candidate to run against the governor. A poll did show that Rockefeller might have had a difficult time beating Robert Wagner, the New York City mayor, but Wagner refused to run, and the Democratic nomination is still up for grabs. When the governor gets down to the hard campaigning for re-election, his problem will be to maintain his liberal image in welfare-minded New York City without offending more conservative voters upstate. Above all, he'll have to win overwhelmingly in New York State to demonstrate to the GOP across the country his great vote-getting prowess. without at the same time convincing party leaders that he's really a Democrat in disguise. To guard against this, he has tried hard to keep his fences mended at home and away. He recently took a speech-making swing through the western states. He has been presenting, according to the New York Times, his freewheeling version of Republicanism in a package not only palatable, but sometimes downright appetizing to large masses of the party's fundamentalists. Rockefeller certainly lost some votes, nobody knows how many, when his marriage ended in divorce. But he is likely to gain strength from the fact that his running mate this fall will be Senator Jacob Javits, so popular for a Republican in New York City that even some Democratic congressmen turned out for a recent dinner in his honor. It was at this dinner that Danny Kaye showed how it's possible to succeed in politics without really trying by delivering the very model of a say-nothing speech.
Now, I may be a little confused because the representative, the senior senator of the state in which I now abide, which has had the greatest population explosion in the history of these great 50 states, as we know, insofar as having, not as we consider, but therefore the distinguished body of the public forum that we know as the United States Senate has in turn not yet, and I think there shall be done insofar as we, the group of senators,
Politics is not all speech-making. These men are rearranging the boundaries of New York's congressional districts. States that gain or lose House seats as a result of the national consensus must reapportion, and this is the first election in which the big population shifts of the 50s will be reflected. 16 states will lose representation, 9 will gain. The South and the East are the big losers, the West the big gainer. Arranging the new district lines to favor the party in control of the state is an ancient, apparently inevitable part of politics known as gerrymandering. The Democrats in New York claim the Republican-controlled legislature has gerrymandered the state so that the Republicans will pick up 6 to 8 extra seats in November. The GOP pleads innocent. This was also the year of the Supreme Court's historic decision that the courts have a right to take action in cases of distorted representation. But the full impact of that decision won't be felt in the November elections. And politicians think that partisan redistricting across the whole country will end up pretty close to a standoff, perhaps favoring the Republicans by a handful of seats in the next Congress. The charges of GOP gerrymandering in New York are balanced in California, where the Democrats have control of the state legislature. There, the GOP claims that the state has been gerrymandered. Now, none of this affects statewide races, including one that interests the whole country. The race for governor in California should be at least half as exciting as the last presidential campaign. It has half the same candidates.
This is the 6th time that I have had the opportunity to file for office as a candidate in California, and always in the office of Ben Hite. This to me is a good omen because each time that I have filed before, I have won in the state of California.
Richard Nixon, controversial and fascinating as ever, is laying his political life on the line. The size of his vote in next Tuesday's Republican primary will be the first measure of his new stature. Nevertheless, he has not hesitated to scorn the support of the John Birch Society and thus risk losing the votes of a sizable portion of the extreme right wing of the California GOP.
A member of the Birch Society, by definition, must support Welch. And that means he's against Eisenhower and says Eisenhower is a conscious agent of the communist conspiracy. On this, there can be no compromise.
Nixon's most serious opponent in the primary is Joseph Schell, who denies he's an extreme right-winger, but is not scornful of them.
Oh, no, I believe that I am a conservative, and I believe totally in the concept that if you can control the operations of government, keep them down to a legitimate roar, somewhere near the expansion rate of the population expansion rate, that you absolutely cannot go into a socialistic operation. So from this standpoint, you might say that I'm ultra-conservative. I'm an economic ultra-conservative.
Are you accepting support of the John Birch Society? I don't think the question is whether you accept support of the society or not. I'm not in favor of societies or groups and organizations who have definite, strong political attitudes operating outside of the political parties. I'm not a member. I am not going to be a member. And those people that I know that are members are solid, constructive citizens. And I believe that anyone in politics that says, I don't want a vote from an individual is not telling the truth, and I want the votes of these individuals.
If Nixon wins next Tuesday's primary, he faces 57-year-old Governor Pat Brown in the election. The Democrats are apparently united in California this year, which is unusual. But in 1960, Nixon took the state from Kennedy after Brown had predicted that he'd lose by 1 million votes.
Well, I don't think Mr. Nixon knows much about the state of California. Every speech he's made shows a colossal ignorance. The man certainly has wide experience on the international and national field, but you'll find that in a state like California that it's some very complicated things that you can't learn in Washington and you can't learn it writing a book.
Governor Brown boasts of a state budget in balance, an actual $8 million cut in taxes, and a 20-year freeway development plan.
When you have a good case on the law, you pound the law. When you have a good case on the facts in court, you pound the facts. When you have neither, you pound the table. You watch the Republican campaign, analyze the things they're saying, and you will find that they have neither the law nor the facts. And the only thing they're doing is pounding the table. Thank you very, very much. I'll be back on the victory.
The Nixon camp says Brown is vulnerable on several fronts that the former vice president can exploit. But much of the campaign so far has focused less on controversy over what Brown has done or not done than on what Nixon has said or written, such as this reference to California visits by the president.
I have carried California every time I have run, and I have done it always by standing on my own feet, speaking for myself. And I say that the volunteer workers, Californians, are going to be the answers to all the carpetbaggers from outside this state who will be coming in here to try to tell Californians how to vote.
If Mr. Nixon has an affinity for crises, some of them perhaps avoidable, he also has shown remarkable resilience. Polls show him favored to beat Mr. Shell handily in the primary and the November 6th election a toss-up. He is the first to agree this is his make-or-break campaign.
You know, one thing that is characteristic, I suppose, of all candidates is that the candidate assumes that he's going to win, and he must think in terms of victory and not in terms of defeat. I'm no exception in that respect. Certainly, I would say that objective observers would say that if I did not win for governor of California, that my political future would be somewhat dim. I would agree with that objective critique, but on the other hand, I don't expect to lose. I expect to win.
If the political future of Mr. Nixon hangs on the outcome in California, the eventual destiny of the Republican Party itself may be shaped by how it fares in '62 in the great forest of the Democratic South, where once, as the saying went, the fine for shooting Republicans out of season was $10 in costs. That story after this message.
Wake up. It's time to paint the walls. And time to find out what millions of users already know. What makes new DuPont Lucite so different from ordinary wall paint. DuPont Lucite doesn't require stirring or thinning. Lucite doesn't drip or run like regular paint, and it really loads your brush. Lets you carry more paint to the wall each time you dip. Fewer dips mean a faster job. Like all good things, he wants to share this with his wife, who incidentally knows all about Lucite, having done over the guest room with it just a short time ago. She knows that Lucite washes out of painting tools with plain soap and water. Now they both know Lucite dries to a beautiful flat finish in just half an hour. You'll like Lucite wall paint, because Lucite makes you like painting. Try DuPont Lucite for beauty without bother.
American elections are scarcely a fair fight when a fourth of the voters dwell in the land of the one-party system, the South. More than 100 House seats are Southern. About 90 aren't even challenged by Republicans in a normal off-year election. But this year, Republicans would challenge more than half of these safe Democratic seats. They want to enlarge the persistent Southern trickle toward their party to a tidal wave someday. This year, they'll settle for a swollen stream. Does the Republican new frontier lie in the land where the sweet magnolias blossom? Some leading Republicans feel sure it does. One is a transplanted Rockefeller, Winthrop, brother of Nelson, who likes the looks of Arkansas enough to live there.
Yes, I fundamentally believe it. I think it's one of these things that once it gets started, it's going to go like a house fire.
But many outbreaks of Republicanism in the South are essentially a rebellion against the National Democratic Party. Typically, they are young, ultra-conservative, and segregationists, like these Republicans in South Carolina. Only a few years ago, they held their convention in a hotel elevator. This year, they are challenging Olin Johnston's Senate seat with journalist William Workman. But over in Georgia, the GOP includes a range of attitudes, and for the first time since 1876, Georgia Republicans have actually put up a man to run for governor.
Gentlemen, at this time to submit to you for nomination as candidate of our party for the state of Georgia, Mr. Ed Smith.
The Georgia Republicans make no racial distinctions. Negro registration is high in the state, and Negro support may one day be indispensable to a winner. The Georgia GOP's tolerance is a bold move, and the night of March 31st, the Klan reacted in traditional fashion outside Atlanta's Biltmore Hotel in the rain. Inside, the Republicans held their integrated kickoff dinner.
I'll get him!
Friend, tonight we are on the launching pad, and on November 6th we are going into orbit.
Yes, this is a year of political revolution in Georgia. First, the notorious county unit system is dead, and from now on all primaries will be decided by popular vote. And the last straw, respectable Georgians are running for high office as Republicans. CBS correspondent Hughes Rudd found plenty of GOP optimism. This is Robert Snodgrass, Republican National Committee man from Atlanta.
The people are ready for a change, Hughes. Ed Smith will be elected governor of this state. People said just a short time ago, the county unit system would never die. Yes, this is a new day we're living in. Unbelievable things are happening.
Georgia Republicans must find enough people interested in the two-party system to sign their men onto the ballot. 65,000 signatures for Ed Smith and 12,000 for Jim O'Callahan, who's running for Congress in the 5th District.
I happen to be a Democrat.
Well, you don't have to be a Republican to sign this petition, and you don't have to
Signature gathering requires a kind of personal politicking that is rather rare in our time.
And in doing so, anybody can sign the petition, and really that's all we're looking for.
May I read your petition?
Yes, you certainly may.
It gets a heartening response sometimes.
Yes, I'll sign it.
All right, fine. It has to be with a ballpoint pen. You have a ballpoint? Fine.
I've been a lifelong Republican, and I'm glad to do anything I can to help the Republicans out in the state. I've always voted Republican ticket all my life. I don't expect to vote anything else but Republican ticket.
Oh, no, boy, you've come to the wrong place. I'm a Democrat.
Well, it doesn't make any difference. You don't have to be a
yes,
Republican.
it makes a difference. It makes a difference. I've got nothing for the Republicans.
Do you think there's a chance?
Oh, we think there's a wonderful chance.
On what other far horizons do hopeful Republicans make out their party's new frontier? With the young, the new college generation, so some of them think. There is a certain revival of conservative philosophy on American campuses. In part, it's Goldwater conservatism, but only in part. In general, it's an intellectual reaction against the dominant liberalism of the past 30 years. After all, any new school of thought becomes an orthodoxy in time. One vital center of this reaction is right in the middle of Kennedy land. at Harvard University. There, a bright group of students now publish a progressive Republican magazine that delights the heart of their party seniors. CBS News correspondent Bill Leonard asked editor Bruce Chapman if this outbreak of elephantiasis in Cambridge is a freak or a solid movement.
Well, I'd like to plead neither. We don't have a movement. I think that some of these movements are fictions made up by either publicity men or by the press inadvertently. Young people are much as they have always been. Perhaps they're slightly more conservative in the broad picture. But I think that the significant thing today is that it is the conservatives, and especially the moderate conservatives, or progressive conservatives, if you will, are more articulate than they have been in the past. And I think they're more articulate now than are the liberals. I think that is the significant thing, rather than sheer numbers.
What do you think of the leadership of the Republican Party in Congress since the new administration has taken over?
Well, we have a great problem in Congress. Now that we're out of national office, much of the impetus for new ideas in the Republican Party in Congress has disintegrated. And this is partly the fault of the leadership. We took a poll when we were preparing a special issue just on the Republicans in Congress, and of the 35 Republicans that we interviewed, only 2 thought that the Evan Charlie production was helping the Republican Party, and those 2 were Evan Charlie.
Senator Dirksen and Congressman Halleck speak for themselves later in the program, and we examine some of the eager new faces of '62 after this message.
The 50 Faces of '62 continues. Here again is Eric Sevareid.
The great game of politics season of '62. We've looked at New York, California, the South, a few of the young generation. There are dark horses to be clocked, shadow candidates to be identified, family dynasties to be traced, and one overriding issue. But first we move north to Michigan. This is the political rookie of the year and a heavily publicized addition to the list of men who might oppose John F. Kennedy in 1964.
I will be a candidate for the Republican gubernatorial nomination, but an active candidate only after I have completed my responsibilities as a Constitutional Convention delegate.
In the period of the next 2 weeks, to raise $200 for us. In this manner, we would hope that you could make 20...
CBS cameras were present when George Romney's young volunteers plotted to gain the support of everything in Michigan that moves.
Your appeal to them, I think, should be based on the fact that if George Romney is going to win the governorship, whatever office he seeks, he will have to do it through the means of the independent and disenchanted Democratic voters.
Ideally, turning up 3 times as many Romney boosters as there are voters in the state.
The people at this table here are the grandparents in this progression. This is the grandparent series. Now, if the thing goes into its logical, mathematical conclusion, the progression, and we are intending now to have 50 grandparents as recruiters, the progression by the time you get to the great-grandchildren, or the 4th stage of the thing, if it goes into a perfect mathematical curve, would be 8 million members.
I've got a list of about 14 people who have already contributed $10. If anybody else here would like to contribute, I've got the book to record them.
Atta boy. This is the prize. The state capitol at Lansing, presently occupied by Romney's opponent in November, Governor John B. Swainson. Swainson, 37 years old, double amputee and war hero, has had almost no national publicity, but he means to win. CBS News correspondent Bernard Eisman found him cool and confident.
If you had to characterize your opponent politically, how would you do it?
Well, certainly I don't know all of the motivations behind Mr. Romney, but it would seem that he doesn't know whether he's Tweedledee or Tweedledum. And as far as I can tell, he has very little knowledge of some of the problems here in Michigan, and some of his statements would indicate that he has very little insight into some of these problems.
Is it your feeling that he's using the Michigan state gubernatorial race merely as a stepping stone to higher political ambition?
Well, I think the indications are, and certainly I've heard this comment made many times, that he is not interested in being the governor of the state of Michigan, but rather he is interested in being the president of the United States, and he looks upon this as a convenient vehicle. I do know, however, and I will say very candidly, I'm not interested in being the president of the United States. In fact, this opportunity is denied to me because I was born of Canadian parents in Canada, and my parents immigrated to this country when I was 9 months old, and there's no question that the Constitution prohibits that office to me. But I must say also...
Well, now we know there won't be a hard-fought Democratic primary in 1960.
Well, I haven't lost much sleep about the circumstances of birth here.
The race in Michigan, however it may be resolved, reflects in Mr. Romney what seems to be a trend in the kind of man seeking high office. The new breed tends to be short on political experience, long on bank account, and bearing names a voter is likely to recognize. James Michener, the Pulitzer Prize-winning writer running for Congress in Pennsylvania, tells how he contracted the disease.
I'm a man who is concerned about what happens. I would say that I am like George Romney. He could go on making automobiles the rest of his life. He wants to be governor of Michigan. For him to be governor of Michigan probably costs him $150,000 a year income. He's probably nuts to do it. But this happens to men. Rockefeller doesn't have to be governor of New York. Goldwater has a marvelous business. Dilworth and Clark could make a fortune in law. They were very brilliant men. Well, this happens to us sometimes, and it's happened to me.
And it's happened to all sorts, to people less well fortified with cash and accomplishment. To Frank Sinatra's press agent, Charles Moses, who's running for Congress in California. To Kenny Sailors, a former pro basketball player who's a candidate for the GOP Senate seat in Wyoming. And to a Georgia preacher, Henry Mills, who wanted to run for governor on the Prohibition ticket. He was willing to sell his prize racehorse, named Dirty Face, to raise the nomination fee of $1,500, but no takers, and he's back preaching. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts provides the most glamorous and in some ways most interesting collection of candidates for 62. John F. Kennedy's old Senate seat is sought by his youngest brother, by the nephew of the Speaker of the House, and by the son of the vice presidential candidate of 1960, among others. It will take party conventions and probably a primary to pick the final opponents, but the race has already focused national attention on family tradition, privilege, and responsibility in American politics. To this subject, the candidates address themselves, interviewed by Bill Leonard, first Harvard professor Stuart Hughes, grandson of Charles Evans Hughes, running as an independent.
Is it your observation that there are families in America that have a dynastic tradition of public service?
Yes, there are. The most eminent, of course, was the Adams family right here in Massachusetts. I think this is fine as long as each new generation starts off on its own and makes its own way. What I do not like is the notion of members of a family pushing someone in the younger generation when he may not be quite ready for the office in question.
George Cabot Lodge, Republican. Does he think he'd be in politics if his name wasn't Lodge?
Yes, I do. I do. I am in politics regardless of my last name, regardless of who my relatives may be. I am in politics because I believe that I have had the experience to help in these times, which, as I have indicated, I think are extremely dangerous.
Do you think your family name is an asset or a liability?
Well, I would suppose it was an asset. My father, I think, is a respectable man, and he's admired by many for his work in the UN and elsewhere. And I would say that insofar as I am associated with him, that this is a helpful a helpful aspect of this campaign.
You think Ted Kennedy is running because his name's Kennedy?
This I must leave to him to answer.
I am running as a Democrat, not as a Kennedy, and I'm confident that the people will make the determination on the basis of who they think can be the effective voice for the Democratic Party, and also will make a judgment in November as well as who they think can be the most effective for the state as well in the United States Senate.
You have a big advantage as a candidate being a Kennedy, don't you?
Well, I think being a Kennedy has its advantages and disadvantages as well, Bill. I think that the advantages is providing me with a background and a broad experience in great events that have taken place, and in providing me with a background and experience here in Massachusetts, which is unique in understanding our problems. But I feel that, as well, that people are constantly measuring me against the high standards which have been set by both my brothers. And I think that this, of course, puts almost a considerable burden on my own candidacy as well.
Edward J. McCormick, Jr., Kennedy's arch rival, agrees.
Well, it's a question of whether a name is ever a political asset or a liability, in the sense that because you have a name, you're expected to do more things than someone without a name. But I like to feel that, in view of the fact that I have had my name on the ballot some 13 times in this state, and that I've been elected 3 times to municipal office and 3 times to state office, that somewhere along the line I've established my own identity, and I'm running on this identity rather than a name.
Do you think there's been an overemphasis in Massachusetts recently on big families in politics?
Oh, I don't know as you could call it an overemphasis. I think that it's natural that there'd be an emphasis on it with George Lodge and Teddy Kennedy and myself. But back in 1958, I ran against Christian A. Herter, Jr., another good name. I defeated him for Attorney General substantially.
Congressman Lawrence Curtis, he's trying for the Senate now, with just a plain old name.
Well, of course, I emphasize experience in this campaign, and I believe the Senate is not the place for a person to make his first step for elective office. You might say shooting for the top and relying on a name, so we have a few little expressions that I've used in the campaign, that a seat in the United States Senate should be merited and not inherited, that the United States Senate is no place for on-the-job training.
We'll just have to wait and see. The resources of some of the Massachusetts candidates point up the extraordinary high cost of the modern political campaign, but there are modern ways of filling campaign chests as well as emptying them. These ordinary New York City Democrats paid $5 each for the privilege of inspecting the houses and art treasures of extraordinary New York Democrats like Averil Harriman, Mrs. Albert Lasker, Mrs. Marietta Tree. The great and the glamorous are almost always the bait in campaign fundraising, and the other night in New York, other Democrats contributed up to $1,000 to have dinner with the president and hobnob with stars of stage, screen, and Democratic politics. Money-raising techniques are changing, and so are campaign methods. TV provides the face and the voice, but not the touch of the hand. Person-to-person contact is considered essential this year as always.
Are you aware of the primary coming up in September?
Yes, I am.
Well, I hope you vote in it and vote the right way.
Right.
I'd like to have your support, such a charming-looking lady.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
You'll
kindly.
have my support.
Thank
right.
you lots.
Thank you.
In this year's primaries, a lot more attention is being paid the woman voter, which means getting out and around in the daytime when the ladies have fewer parking and babysitter problems and more free time. And the hustings are likely to be the local supermarket where the voter and the cost of living meet head-on. The truth is, modern gadgetry has not made campaigning one bit easier. The vast majority of candidates cannot afford a minute of TV time. They have to get out and go. They must get their message across, even if it means talking down to the people.
You're a very fine young fellow. What is your name?
Charlie.
Sure. Carlito! Oh, Carlito. ¿Cómo se llama, Carlito? Carlito? Mi nombre es Herberto.
Little Carlito may not be concerned, but at this early stage of the game, the man on the street is talking like this.
The problem is a great one, and I think that they've got to do more than the King-Anderson bill calls for. but I think as a starter, it's just fine.
Well, I hadn't given it very much thought, however, but seems like we're doing mighty well without it.
I think that we get a lot more in this world by voluntarily taking care of those people that need something than having the government do it.
Oh, why should I be concerned about the government entering into medical care? They enter into many things, and they enter into it because of the protection of most of the people.
First thing you know, we'll all be working for the government. And I'm against that.
Personally, I'm not sure.
Now that does not seem such an extraordinary piece of legislation 25 years after Franklin Roosevelt passed the Social Security Act. Well, let's hear what some people say. First, we read that the AMA is against it, and they're entitled to be against it. Though I do question how many of those who speak so violently about it have read it.
Why are most doctors so opposed to King Anderson? Are you beginning to see the truth? Our fees are not involved. Our practice of quality medicine is. Your health is. If our government wants to move toward welfare state medicine, let them tell us so honestly. Why sneak it in piece by piece on the backs of old people first?
Medicare, a new word on the tongue, a new issue in the political fight. A gut issue, as the pros put it. The issues in this election run from township drainage bonds to the war in Southeast Asia to the stock market's fainting fit. But Medicare has been shaping up as the one overriding national issue. We have, after all, some 17 million people over 65, and they have millions of children who help pay their hospital bills. If Congress doesn't pass the Kennedy bill by autumn, or one very much like it, Medicare could decide the election in a good many districts. It's got every other candidate in the land looking anxiously over his shoulder. But as of right now, how do party prospects look from headquarters? Here's David Schoenbrunn, CBS News Chief Washington Correspondent.
The speeches are being made and the battle engaged in the 50 states. But when it's all over, the successful men and women will make their pilgrimage from the Medinas of the country to this Mecca of politics, the nation's capital. Congress is the temple of the democratic faith. Here sit the high priests who run the temple, for although every congressman has, in theory, an equal voice, some are more equal than others. The party leaders control committee assignments and make policy decisions. They are the kingmakers who dispense power, patronage, and prestige to the faithful or ostracize the infidels. These are important men at all times, but most particularly in a non-presidential election year when Congress alone is in the nation's spotlight. We called upon both teams of party leaders to ask them about the prospects ahead for 62. For the Republicans, the leaders are Senator Everett Dirksen of Illinois and Congressman Charles Halleck of Indiana, the famous Evan Charlie Battery. For the Democrats, the leaders are Congressman Carl Albert of Oklahoma and Senator Mike Mansfield. First, Senate Majority Leader Mansfield.
Well, I think that this election is a prelude to the presidential election of 1964. I would point out that we Democrats will be running on the record made by the President of the United States, who is a Democrat. I think that we will increase our majorities in both houses this election, and I think that the momentum which has been set in motion by President Kennedy will be carried forward and will ensure his re-election in 1964.
Well, gentlemen, we have some reports here. The latest poll is from the Congressional Quarterly, which indicates that there are 9 safe seats for the Republicans that you can't touch in the Senate, and another 4 leaning towards the Republicans and 6 more for toss-up. What's your comment on that, Senator Mansfield?
Well, we concede nothing to the Republicans. We take nothing for granted for ourselves. We intend to fight in every state for Democratic candidates, and we'll let the results show just what success we'll be able to achieve.
Well, thank you, Senator. Now, Congressman Albert, your entire House is up for re-election this year. How do you see the prospects after Election Day? What kind of a House?
We need to increase our majority. I think we will.
The Republicans are making a lot of noise about big inroads on you in this off-year election.
Well, I don't take much stock in the noise that is being made at this time because I haven't seen anything on the part of the Republican leadership or the Republican Party that indicates that they have anything to take to the people this fall. Now, I concede that this is one of the most important elections in recent years. It may be the most important. We have a great young president who has the most integrated program designed to move America ahead of any president in my time. I think it's absolutely imperative to the future of our party and to our country that this program be adopted during the present and the next Congress. And of course, whether it is adopted or not is going to depend in large measure upon whether we are given a working majority in the House of Representatives. I would like to see, and I think we have a very good chance of having, at least 275 Democrats in the House of Representatives after the next election. Now, I don't know what the Republicans are going to use as a campaign issue. I'd like to know. I'd like to hear something about it.
Mr. Halleck, your opposite number, Carl Albert, Majority Leader, tells us that he thinks he's going to, in this election, increase his majority from 263 to 275.
Well, he's just whistling through the graveyard. There isn't any question but what we're on the plus side. We've had 3 or 4 what we call by-elections, special elections. Now, we didn't quite win in the Arizona election, the New York City election, the Detroit election, but we came so close that if that improvement, as against 1960 election results, were to be carried out across the board, then clearly the House of Representatives would come under the control of the Republicans. As to the tactics, I think it's rather obvious by now that the Kennedy administration has proposed something for everybody, and a lot of it's supposed to be free, and of course nothing is free, actually. Somebody's got to pay for it. But it's apparent to me that they're seeking to attract a block here and a block there on the theory that now we're going to do something real good for you. I've got a kind of a sneaking suspicion that if all of the things that have been advocated by the Kennedy administration in the 24 messages that have been sent up to the House of Representatives were to be adopted by this Congress, why, the people in the Kennedy administration would head for the hills.
What is the image of the Republican Party that you are bringing to the voters in this congressional year?
Well, I do not believe the image of the Republican Party has changed substantially from the time when Abraham Lincoln was the leader. He has said on many, many occasions, and that has been fully documented, that it is a conservative party. To that, of course, I think you have to add that it is mindful constantly of change in a changing world. And it's probably best expressed by Lincoln himself when he said the legitimate object of government is to do for people what needs to be done.
Senator, you and Mr. Halleck are the spokesman, really, for the Republican Party. You seem to have assumed that role.
Well, we try to, for after all, we were the spokesman when we had Eisenhower in the White House and held these weekly conferences, and then, of course, uttered the sentiments that were consonant with the party line. Now, we just had to pick that up after Eisenhower left and put it in Capitol Hill, and there follow pretty much the same format. That we are doing today, and I think it will be conceded that that constitutes leadership.
Well, as you've seen, the leaders have drawn up the lines of battle and set the tone of the campaign. But the day-to-day, district-to-district tactics are carried out by such campaign captains as the co-chief of the Democrat Speaker's Bureau, Congressman Ed Edmondson of Oklahoma, and the Republicans' congressional campaign manager, Bob Wilson of California. Now, analyzing the same data, these experts come up with very different conclusions. Listen closely as they speak in turn to the same basic campaign questions. First, Congressman Edmondson.
Mr. Schoenbrunn, I think the Democrats are going to reverse the historical trend of many years and make gains in the House and in the Senate as well.
Well, we need 44 seats to control. We have about 100 target districts, districts where we're going to concentrate, and if we can win half of those, we think we're going to win control.
It's this almost constitutional fault with many Republicans that they endorse verbally worthwhile programs, and yet when you come down to the actual decision-making of deciding whether you're going to put money into the program or deciding whether you're going to give any kind of enforcement procedures and enforcement powers to a desirable program, that they invariably take a negative or obstructive position.
Well, we've got the voting records of the Democrats in these 100 target districts, for example, and we find that they're talking a different line at home than they are voting here, and so, of course, it's going to be our job to take this voting record and put it in the hands of the Republicans running against them and let the public at home know how they're voting.
We have a President of the United States in John Kennedy who has served both in the House and in the Senate, who knows intimately the membership of both of those bodies and who knows the problems of individual districts and states as few men in history have known them. I think this enables him to be in a unique position to be helpful to individual senators and congressmen in their re-election campaign.
Where President Kennedy has endorsed candidates locally and so forth, there have been as many failures as there have been successes. I just don't think the coattails are going to be of much value in this 1962 election.
Well, I think we have the unbeatable combination of a great leader in President Kennedy and an action program which the Congress has been implementing rapidly.
Well, that's what makes a horse race and an election. The form sheets and course records are the same, but the handicappers don't agree all the way, or at least they say they don't. Both sides do agree, however, that the Democrats may keep their majority in the Senate, although the Republicans claim they'll gain a few seats and cut the margin down. Each side claims it will win a majority of the House. Most political experts, including some party spokesmen in private conversation, feel sure the Democrats will maintain their present control of the House, but may lose a few seats. The consensus is that after all the banners and buttons are stored away, the Congress will be back pretty near where it started, with a shift of no more than a dozen or so seats. The difference between the public party predictions and the private expert estimates is due principally to a big, unanswered question, a question that will not be definitively answered until November. Can President Kennedy maintain his personal popularity at the present high peak, and will this translate into votes for his party when he himself is not on the ballot? More about this now from Charles Collingwood.
The man who isn't running for anything this year, John F. Kennedy, is almost as much a candidate as if he were. An incumbent president is always a powerful factor in an off-year election. If he's popular, politicians think they'll prosper from his benediction. If he's unpopular, why, he's a better target to run against than one's actual opponent. Even the ghosts of presidents from another age still roam the campaign trails. Many a Republican will run this year, as always, on the same ticket with Abraham Lincoln, balanced by the number of Democrats invoking the help of Thomas Jefferson. Of course, you don't have to have been a president to be a shadow candidate. It's sometimes enough just to want to be president. Barry Goldwater is safe in the Senate this year, but he'll still be the man who in more than one race. Not all shadow candidates are native-born. This year, it will be popular to run against Nikita Khrushchev, just as everyone ran against Stalin before him. Ah, how the welkin will ring as the candidates tell us what they would do to Khrushchev if only they could get their hands on him. And if campaigning against Khrushchev palls, Fidel Castro makes a very good road company villain. Here at home, Walter Reuther hasn't thrown his hat into the ring, but a holy crusade will be mounted against him from more than one platform. From others, the candidates will step forward to offer protection from Roger Blau and United States Steel. Billy Saul Estes evidently is going to say as little as the rules of evidence will allow, but he will be as deeply involved in the campaign as if he were fighting to get into office instead of trying to stay out of jail. There are fashions in this business of shadow candidates. It used to be good politics for Chicago's Big Bill Thompson to make King George V his principal opponent. but no one has run against Queen Elizabeth lately. FDR once worked the Republicans into the position of running against his dog Fala, and a few more questions in Congress about Caroline Kennedy's pony and macaroni may get into this year's campaign. Many a man has been returned to office by beating an opponent who was never in the race. And to the extent that the shadow candidates serve as substitutes for real ones, they cheapen the political debate. But they can also stand for very real issues. Thus, Khrushchev and Castro represent the historic struggle between freedom and communism, and Billy Saul Estes, the problem of improper influence on public servants, all the legitimate stuff of political dialogue. So, in this sense, the shadow candidates are not so shadowy after all.
50 states, thousands of candidates, millions of dollars to be spent, and billions of words. The tremors have started. By September, the place will be jumping. The new Congress will be the key, the House in particular. Republicans want to control it as a check on the president. The president feels he's been checked enough as it is. He wants not just a Democratic majority, but a majority of Kennedy Democrats. Otherwise, his new frontier will fade beyond the horizon of the future. The central argument is on the size of the role of government in our daily affairs. This was the argument in ancient China. The philosopher Confucius said, "As men are constituted, the thing most important to them is government." And this President Kennedy and his frontiersmen believe. But the philosopher Lao Tzu said, "The state should be governed as we cook small fish without much business." And this the conservative opposition believes. In 1,000 varieties of practical application, this argument will rage from now to November 6th. More than a century ago, the sharpest foreigner ever to inspect these shores, the Frenchman de Tocqueville, said, "A perpetual stir prevails. Rest is unknown. They love change, but they dread revolutions." People who like change don't need revolutions. We'll be back with another report when the weather and the arguments warm up a few degrees more. This is Eric Sevareid. Good night.
This broadcast has been brought to you by DuPont Lucite Wall Paint. Makes painting clean, easy, and quick for beauty without bother. The CBS News Election Unit gratefully acknowledges the cooperation of CBS-affiliated radio and television news departments in the preparation of this broadcast. The 50 Faces of 62 was produced under the control and supervision of CBS News and was pre-recorded on videotape.